Hello. Hello. Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of our usual English sessions. Right. Today's lesson will be on the topic compare and contrast. Compare and contrast. These are two opposite words, to compare and to contrast. Writers sometimes use comparison and contrast to organize their writing. Clue words such as same, also, before, although, and however signal comparisons and contrast. Good readers notice the author's comparisons and contrasts and make their own as they read. Now let's look at compare and contrast again. When we say compare, let's look at the first word, compare. Compare is when you put together two or more things or people and you look for the things that they have in common, right? The things they have in common. What are we saying here? Let's create a scenario. Let's have two boys. Call two boys, for example, in front of the class. Look at these two boys and ask the students to describe what they have in common. For example, you can say both of them are wearing shoes or sneakers. Both of them are boys. This is you are comparing. Both of them are in grade 5, for example. Both of them are very smart, for example. Both of them like football, for example. Both of them study Arabic, maths, and English, and computer. It's common. These are the common features, the things that they have in common. But when you talk about contrast, contrast means difference. So, what are the things that are different about these boys? Even though these two boys are in grade 5, they have things that are different. First, they don't have the same names. That's the first contrast. One likes football better than volleyball. The other one lives in the north of Riyadh. The other one lives in the east of Riyadh, for example. One is very smart. The other one is not very smart. One reads very well. The other one does not read very well. One has two sisters in the girls section. This one has no sisters at all. So these are the things that we call contrast. Compare means the things that are the same. You compare two things or two people together. For example, you can take two books again and compare them. What do these books have in common? The first thing is that they are books. They have many pages. Both of them have many pages. Both of them have pictures. Both of them are written by authors. Both of them have very colorful background. These are some of the things, the features that we say are the same about the books. But then we have the things that are not the same about the books. You can say, for example, this book is an English book. This one is a math book. This one is written by an author who is a woman. This one is written by an author who is a man. This book is divided into sections. This book is divided into chapters. These are some of the things we talk about when we talk about compare and contrast. Now, let's look at this story. In this story, it says, read the passage, then complete the diagram below. Hillary and her friends wanted to move to New York City because it seemed exciting compared to their quiet hometown. They saved money for a year to afford the move. When it was time to move, their friends gave them a big send-off party. After they moved to New York, They enjoyed the energy of the crowds as they bustled down the street. They visited museums with amazing collections of art and artifacts. They experimented with new foods from all over the world. They were unprepared, however, for how expensive everything was. And even though they were surrounded by people, they found it hard to make friends. They were surprised, but sometimes they longed for the peace and quiet of their hometown. Over time, they understood that their new home was a mixture of advantages and disadvantages. Right, let's look back at the story. The story centered around someone called Hilary. Hilary, of course, the name of a girl or a woman. Hilary, a young girl, a school girl maybe, moved and her family, they wanted to move to another city called New York. Okay? The reason why they wanted to move is stated in the passage just because it seemed exciting compared to their hometown. The place where they lived, they think is noisy. So they want to move to a place that is quieter compared to where they are living now. So what happened? They prepared for that. They saved money for a whole year so that that will help them to move, transportation, moving their property and all of this to a new town. And they saved money for a whole year for that, to be able to move slowly. So when it was time to move, their friends gave them a send-off party because their friends will no longer see them again in the town where they lived, because they were going to start to move to New York, and they will not see them probably. It will take a long time maybe before they see them. So after they moved to New York, for the first time, they started enjoying the crowd. There's a lot of people moving up and down. In New York, of course, a big city in America. So they visited museums. They saw a lot of artifacts, things that people made before, long ago, which we call artifacts. They found amazing collections of art. And then they found new types of food from all over the world, which they ate for the first time. They were unprepared, however, for what? How expensive everything was. Compared to where they lived before, things were not as expensive. But now in New York, they found everything very expensive. And even though they were surrounded by people, they found people who they made friends with. They were surprised. Sometimes they longed for the peace and quiet of the hometown. Now they realized when they came to New York that where they lived before was quieter compared to New York. They thought New York was quiet and they prefer living in New York than their old home. But now they realized that it was better to live in their home. They missed home. So now they came to the conclusion that over time, their new home was a mixture of advantages and disadvantages. So in other words, living in New York had a lot of advantages and a lot of disadvantages. Now let's look at, let's see the comparison and contrast. Advantages and disadvantages of moving to New York. The first advantage of moving to New York is the energy of the crowds. Okay? The energy of the crowds. Then the disadvantage of living in New York is very expensive, okay, compared to where they lived before. Another advantage of moving to New York was that they found new foods from all over the world. In their old town, they didn't find new foods from all over the world. They found it in New York. Now, the disadvantage, the difficulty, it was difficult to make friends. They were not used to the people in New York. They have been in this old city and they were used to the people there, so they had lots of friends. Now coming to New York, it will take a long time for them to be able to make friends. Now, the last question says, what prior knowledge do you have about the advantages and disadvantages of living in a big city? Helps you make comparison and contrast. So from this statement, let me go back. This statement which says, when my sister moved to Chicago, she called home every day because she was homesick. Okay? When my sister moved to Chicago, she called home every day because she was homesick. Right. So this statement tells us that, shows us that the advantages and disadvantages of living in a big city. That helps us to make comparison and contrast. I want to stop this lesson here. I hope you find it interesting about comparison and contrast. Perhaps in a future lesson, we will have something more to discuss. Thank you so much.